Hey everybody, and welcome to our regularly scheduled multi-tenancy working group for Kubernetes meeting. Today, Jim has added an agenda item for us to go over our Kubernetes multi-tenancy documentation proposal with the updates and plans for that.
All right, thank you, Tasha. And let me see if I can, Adrian, if you want to share, or maybe one of you can give me the ability to share. Oh, there we go. So I see the share button, but it still says disabled, but okay, there you go, Adrian.
Yeah, I figured that might just be easier.
All right,
that
makes sense.
You can just tell me, yeah, you just tell me where to go.
Yeah, so I think, we're making progress and we don't have to get into, unless there's some burning issue, we can obviously just address comments and other things asynchronously, but the main thing I wanted to make sure if we're all okay with the schedule and the proposed dates. So maybe if you just want to go down to that section.
This here are the dates. So March 15th, right? So that's in a week.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So yeah, I think we should be. It seems like the main sections. There's some already quite a bit of activity and other things on some of the other sections. We may not, maybe we may need more time, but I think we have till the end of March to complete pretty much, at least something we can convert into a PR. Obviously, once we propose the PR, there'll be reviews, and we can also widen the review at that point to maybe ask folks from other SIGs or other working groups, as well as I think Cncf has some technical writers who can help us with language and grammar and other things as well. So roughly, I guess if we plan for end of March, does that work for everyone? Do we see any problems, any areas where we might need additional help?
No, that works for me.
About this okay.
No, I was just saying that works for me. So I started contributing to one of the sections, and I did see Adrian and Dave that had a few. So yeah, so Jim, as far as the date, that works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it works for me as well. I'm a little bit concerned about this additional considerations, because if we look in the, I've gone and added these also to the sandboxing isolation.
Adrian, your voice is really choppy. Your voice is really choppy. It keeps breaking up.
Sorry about that. Give me a minute to see if I can do something. The rest of you can go on in the meeting.
Yeah, it sounded a bit better once you were closer, and I think, yeah, maybe if you might have to stay stationary.
Yeah, I'm shutting down a couple of tabs. I've been having some trouble with my computer lately. Is that better?
It's audible now. Yeah, it's fine.
Why don't I turn off my video? Yeah, good suggestion. How about that? Is that any better?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly now.
Okay, sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to see if we could find out if we could get people to sign up for this, because if we look at the topics that we want in there, sandboxing, isolation, etc.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of experience in any of those areas. And I think that Ranjith and Jeremy, well, Ranjith, I can't remember if you experience there, but I think Jeremy did as well, like one of the two of you or both of you, plus considerations just for SaaS, I think might be useful to put into this section as well. And so I was wondering if maybe some of the things that we were putting into like concepts and namespace-based tenancy might be better off done in additional considerations, or maybe we break that out into some higher level stuff based on people's expertise.
So, hey, okay, are you all able to hear me properly? This is Devdutt.
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, so yeah, I just turned on my video so that you can put my face to my name, but I'll turn off the video, just I'm having a little bit of choppy bandwidth issues here. But Adrian, to your point, what I feel is, the one other considerations that as part of additional consideration, what we were thinking at CloudArk is what we have seen is a lot of confusion exists out there with respect to general Kubernetes operators and how they play into the SaaS model of multi-tenancy, where, for example, there's no general sort of current understanding is once you have an operator, that's all you need to build a SaaS, but that's not the case. So one of the things that we would like to add, and which can go in the additional considerations, and I can definitely work on that, is this aspect of while building a SaaS, since you mentioned SaaS related things can go in there, how do operators play into an overall SaaS delivery? So that is something that makes sense as part of additional considerations. It can go there. Probably that's what my immediate thought was.
Yeah, so maybe we need to have additional considerations, and then either we have a dedicated SaaS subsection in here, or maybe we just have like additional considerations for SaaS, additional considerations for multi-team, because that's kind of like up here in use cases. Those are the two sort of divisions that we're creating. And I like that as a general organizing principle for this doc. So yeah, maybe like up here in use case, we don't need to do everything. We just need to introduce the concepts. Then we go into, other key concepts, some stuff about namespaces and virtual clusters, virtual control planes. And then we can go into more of the considerations down there. Maybe we can take this stuff like namespace based and VC based, and maybe we can combine both into sort of general approaches. So we have a general section that has names like namespace based, like HNC, and VC based, and then we can have a multi-tenant, like a multi-team section, and then we can have SaaS section where we can go into more of those details. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that will play a little bit better because it's based on the isolation levels story that we're trying to tell, right, Adrian? So you could have a cluster per tenant model, or you could have a team-based model, and then you have the SaaS model, right? So I think so that might fit or gel well into the overall theme of the story that we are trying to tell, instead of just focusing on the namespace based isolation, because I think that will corner us a little bit. Yeah.
And actually, that's a good way. Instead of calling it like general, we or common concerns, we can basically just call them isolation. Like that we can move isolation levels out of the key concept and make that a top level section. And then under that, we have namespace, we have virtual control planes, and then we can even add a multi-cluster as just as an option, just to say like, no sharing within a cluster at all if you really need that kind of isolation.
Yeah, so it's a slight variation of the hard and soft multi-tenancy without using those terminologies, but instead just focusing on the different levels of isolation. Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah, I would love to mention hard and soft just so that we can sort of knock them down and say we're not going to use those terms because they're meaningless. You can have harder and softer along many axes. I think Jim and Tasha have heard me say this, like harp on this subject many times. Yeah, Jim, are you okay with us to go make that change?
No, I think that this sounds good. So just to kind of clarify what we're talking about, and maybe we can just try it out quickly, right? So if we say isolation levels, just making the changes. So typed in changes. That should be isolation levels, and then we're saying namespace based. Is that what we want? So we make that a level 2.
And everything below that becomes, this all becomes level 3.
And then we're saying virtual control planes. This would also be a level 2. So do we want to mention, so far we haven't talked about, dedicated clusters. Is that something we want to bring back here or leave that out?
I think we can mention it as a third option, even if it's just a single pair, like 1 or 2 sentences, just to say, hey, there's a whole spec for that. Good luck.
Yeah, I think we should mention it. Just from the completeness point of view, it will make
I agree.
sense.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know what exactly you call it, but for now, let's say dedicated clusters. Okay, so I think that works. And then in additional considerations, we wanted to say additional considerations. So these are general, and then we say for SaaS providers.
Yeah.
For more specific details, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where I think we can that's where we can really talk about the stuff offered like SaaS Factory and CloudArk, like, how does application delivery work? What does it look like to debug it? How do you do onboarding, and how do you monitor consumption? And I think that's where all of that stuff can go in, because it's not really, I think putting it right at the top, you're getting into too much detail too early. And I think it's important to just mention that these problems exist and send people to the right places to start understanding.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just looking at the table of contents. I think this flows pretty well. So we're saying introduction, we'll go into use cases, key concepts, then isolation levels, namespace based, virtual control planes, and dedicated. So it's increasing levels, and then we have other considerations. Yeah. So one question I had, which I don't know, I guess it's just something that's been, so we use the term isolation, but I also see segmentation used, especially when it comes to networking and things like that. Does anybody, and I couldn't find any good reference for what's the difference, right? And it seems like most folks use them interchangeably, but I think there is some difference, like certain, like namespaces are more segmentation, but to add isolation requires some more constructs, right? Do we want to mention segmentation anywhere, or is isolation, because it's a stronger term, is that sufficient to cover what we need to?
I don't know what segmentation means. To me, segmentation sounds harder than isolation, because it sounds mutually exclusive, whereas isolation can be sort of partial. At
least the way I was thinking of it is like, if you have, in a network, segmentation typically refers to VLANs. When we're talking about the Kubernetes API, we're segmenting the API to have, objects with the same name. It's kind of creating a space under the main API root. But isolation means you're preventing one segment from seeing the other segment. So I was kind of thinking of it the other way around, where isolation is stronger than segmentation. But this is my theory. I couldn't find any good reference for. So wondering if anybody else has seen anything out there.
I mean, just my personal opinion, segmentation is something that I've seen mostly on the networking side of the realm, right? But isolation sort of applies to broader, like it could have storage isolation and
Sure.
yeah, compute isolation, for example, right? So it's a little bit much broader, and I think yeah, segmentation is very focused on the networking aspect, at least from what I've seen.
Well, it also gets used for APIs, right? Because you segment APIs.
Yeah,
so,
APIs, true.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Where do you
anyways,
segment APIs?
So especially like to allow like name redundancy, typically, so I've seen like somewhere, I think even with namespaces, I've seen the term like API segmentation get used, right? But it doesn't imply isolation necessary, right? Because you could still have segments which are completely visible to each other.
Okay. I haven't really heard that term, and so to a certain extent, like we're inventing the terms that we're going to try to standardize. So if we decide we only want to standardize one of them, which is I think what I'd lean towards, if we don't have a crisp definition, let's just use one, at least for the terms we're introducing. That's kind of the way I would tend to lean.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see if, I think I agree. I think isolation is the better term. We'll see if somebody else brings up segmentation anywhere, or if that comes up, we can revisit.
Yeah, if we're referring to like a well-known term from some other domain, like networking, which I'm not an expert in at all, like microsegmentation, it's not a term I've ever heard before. So if we're referring to like a term that has some well-known meaning in some other domain, then sure. But if we're just talking about like Kubernetes multi-tenancy, I think we can keep it simple. If
okay,
is where the direction I tend to head.
All right, yeah, that works. Okay, so yeah, let's make sure, I guess, maybe if you want to quickly revisit and see who's doing what. And I'm happy to, because it seems like there's a few folks, working on the other sections. I can kind of go to some of the others, like the new sections we identified or ones which are not picked up, but yeah, and I think Faye, right now you're the only one on the virtual control planes part of it.
So
Chris,
yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Jim. So one suggestion that I had, and probably this is what you're referring to, or if not, probably we can consider that, is I remember in the first iteration, you had said that we can have primary and secondary authors, that kind of split, which I felt probably may not work out based on certain folks are probably dealing with certain use cases much more regularly than others. So what I felt was we can have someone like an editor, and probably you or Adrian, who have been exposed to many of these use cases, or have had a chance to broadly look at this space for a lot more time, can be overall in charge of the whole thing, in the sense that once all the content comes in, then you sort of make sure that it all meshes well and flows really well.
Right. Yeah, so absolutely happy to play that role. And, I think Adrian and others who have been involved in and kind of seen multi-tenancy implementation, certainly we can do that too. One of the things, I think writing it is hard enough by itself. Group writing is even harder, right? Because obviously we all have a lot of good ideas to share and bring to the table. But so I think it's probably best to have one person kind of write up a section completely, and when they're ready, then we can have others comment, contribute, and morph. The other thing to keep in mind is once we create a PR, we will have wider reviews. There will be, there's a natural sort of editing process as different SIGs that are involved in multi-tenancy will look at this, as well as the CNCF. Like if we can request a technical writer or somebody to go through and help with things like grammar and voice and stuff like that, right? But yes, certainly I can do a first pass and make sure everything kind of fits in or flows together in terms of what we want to cover. Because what we've seen in other areas is there's some natural. Sometimes we end up duplicating things or saying the same thing in different ways in different places, right? So there needs to be some alignment across all of these sections then.
Yeah, and I'm happy to help with that as well, even though I'm writing some of the sections too. Yeah, Jim, if you want to take the lead on the sort of redacting and editing and stuff like that, that sounds good to me. If you want me, like, I might make comments elsewhere, but I can leave them for you to resolve.
I'm happy to help with that too.
Thanks, Tasha.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah. So we'll update that. So let's, I guess once I don't know if we don't need to do this real time, but if there's any gaps in where we need help, let's figure out, and certainly I think there, yeah, I'm trying to think about it from SIG security or other areas. If we do want to, request folks to help with specific sections, we can. Otherwise, we can take a first stab and just work through and then broaden the review process.
Hey, Jim,
yeah.
do you expect the figures?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do you expect the figures? So if we have people want to add figures, do we?
Oh, yes, we can, right? We can put those as PNG or some, whatever JPEG formats and include them. Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm saying that the figures maybe is even harder to get a consensus about the format, about things to show. So I think you can set a tune. So we don't expect every editor add a lot of figures. It's make review really hard. So maybe you can just specify one guys just don't have too much figures. So
right. Yeah. So I think if we do feel a diagram or a picture can help, we can also again ask the CNCF help desk. They have some folks who can help with graphics if we want to just draw up something. Because I don't see too many diagrams in the Kubernetes docs, but there are some like the 4 C's of security and a few others, right, which are just high-level graphics.
Yeah, that maybe we can set a tune here. So just don't add figures in the first place unless it's absolutely necessary. So talk to you guys to see.
Right.
No, I don't know. I slightly disagree. I think if you think that a figure would help, go ahead and add one. And yeah, maybe it's hard to get consensus, but if nobody else wants to fix the figure and like come up with a better one, I would say whoever submits the original one wins. So Faye, if you've got like a great diagram that you want to make, other people can complain, but if they don't want to put in the work to actually update the figure, then I would say that whatever you want goes in. I generally don't write a lot of figures because I'm lazy, because figures are often better. So the
way the reason I was talking, so if we write, papers like this, so maybe high level we need a few figures, maybe. So I don't expect each bullet has. I mean, each sub-bullet has a figure. That's way too much. But as a high-level comparison kind of figure may be helpful. So in that sense, maybe even that figure can be a collaborative, effort. or we have somebody just on behalf of us just draw figures, which most likely. So that's the reason I want to bring it up. So I see the benefit of having figures, but I would say just 1 or 2 maximum.
Sure.
Yeah. So if it helps prove or make a point or emphasize something or clarify something, definitely let's I don't think we should shy away from taking a stab at it, and we can worry about the sort of normalization and putting it in the right graphics later, or we'll get help for that. But yeah, if it's, I guess for these type of docs, it's mostly text that seems to be the norm.
May I make one request, which is that all of the authors add their email addresses to the top of the doc so that I can ping people in comments? I went and added my email address so that anyone can ping me.
Yeah, sure. I will do that.
Okay. Yeah, and one other thing to point out is Google Docs has a pretty nifty versioning feature now, right? So you can always save a version. So if you're making major changes, especially to a section somebody else is also working on, just go and save a version, name it something, and then you can kind of edit it, right? So we don't have to, because otherwise it's always a little bit awkward if you're thinking, should you delete somebody else's or change somebody else's work? But with versioning, we can always go back and retrieve it, right? So, and it's still a good courtesy to reach out to that person and talk to them and see if you can coordinate, but versioning is certainly helpful.
But we don't have branches, right? You can't like fork the document. And...
No, but you can get in there and see who did what. And then if I've actually had like big chunks of document disappear because people are like copying and pasting around. And so it's like yeah, it's good.
It's great for blame. I use it for that all the time.
Is everyone on the Slack? It will be easier if we are collaborating. I don't know if, is everyone on the Slack channel for this? At least those who are authors, I think it will be good if everyone is on the Slack.
Yeah, I'm not. I think I have to get on there. So
yeah. That's what I thought, Ranjit. I didn't find you there.
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely add your email and Slack handles if they, mine is the same. It's just Jim Bagwadi on both. So, so that way we can get a hold of each other and kind of coordinate in smaller groups too. All right. Yeah, one other thing I just wanted to quickly point out is typically for Kubernetes docs, I think the guidance or even other CNCF docs is to not mention specific tools, but to say things like if you want to say CI/CD or build system, that's perfectly fine. But instead of saying Jenkins, even as examples, and then later we can have a section with the right disclaimer where we kind of put third-party tools, and there's some standard, disclaimer and language we'll have to put in there, and allow others to, create PRs to add their own tools if they wish.
Is that reference? So like I've just been writing a segment where I talk about like single tenant applications like WordPress. This is not a recommendation to use WordPress. It's just to make it a little bit more concrete. I think if I could say like blogging software or something like that. But I feel like, I don't know, is that the recommendation not to mention?
I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle on something like WordPress. I think it's more like they don't want it to say use OpenShift, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're just referring to it and it's kind of unrelated application, but if it tends to be a vendor application, it will sort of get flagged as, you kind of, are we favoring one tool versus another, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that as long as whenever we list the tools, we make it as part of a list, and that list can be easily extended.
Right.
I think that's
right.
Yeah, and to kind of elaborate on what Jim was describing, if you look at the docs, usually like there's like a very sort of third person removed explanation of the concept, and then at the bottom they'll be like, in Red Hat you do it this way, on Google Cloud you do it this way, right? So there can be specific kind of stuff like at the bottom as reference implementations, or you can link to maybe like a GitHub, but the idea is like you describe the concept and then you can give kind of pointers to more specific implementations that are vendor specific lower in the doc.
Thanks for
Yep.
that reminder, Jim, Tasha, and Adrian. So the one question that I have, not related to this discussion, but broadly the multi-tenancy discussion, was what is happening at the CNCF level. Remember, there was this entire thread of CNCF is also, there is some folks who are working on a multi-tenancy end-to-end picture, and how that will work together with what we are doing here. And has anyone heard any updates or what's happening there?
No, I mean, that would be pretty tough to do, like, because, you know, like, start thinking about like Istio and Envoy and like all of the different layers of concerns. I think having a CNCF wide definition of multi-tenancy might be useful, but it really ends up being like implementation project by project.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, that's what the feeling, sorry, I got too, but then what's the, I mean, the effort that is happening on that side at the broader level, how will it really proceed further? I was sort of not sure, because key, as we are just discussing, it will come down to every tool and figuring out what's the multi-tenancy posture of every tool, and then, you know, how do you put together the end-to-end thing. But again, the core will come down to whether Kubernetes, what are the options, Istio, what are the options. So I'm not sure what will that document will even look like at the CNCF level.
I don't think I know anything about this document. Could you drop some links in the chat channel?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought there was a, there was a GitHub issue where it started happening at the same time when I think Jim opened this issue, and yeah, I think Jim has posted it there.
Yeah, I think that was from the app delivery CNCF group, right? They had a issue and they kind of linked to our issue, or we linked to theirs, or so. I think the general, I guess the brief answer, like Tasha said, is, you know, we don't know and we don't kind of control what exactly they are doing, but obviously we want to align. And, you know, the idea is once we have something worth reviewing, we would go back to them and ask them for their inputs and feedback, right? And see if we can help with anything that they're doing, right? But at this point, the focus is let's get something done first, right? Where we have enough to go and show others.
Yeah, that's how I want to do this. I want to get a first draft, or even just like publish the first version before worrying too much about how it fits into their stuff. Because like it wouldn't surprise me, for example, if they focus solely on, let's say, the multi-team, what we're calling the multi-team aspect, and ignore SaaS multi-tenancy completely. I don't want to have to work into their framework. I would rather get like our stake in the ground and then sort of iterate if there are ways that we can make it more compatible with what they're doing, or vice versa, if they want to align to some of the ideas that we've put in as well. So yeah, I wouldn't plan up too much up front. I think we've got a pretty good set of ideas and concepts and suggestions for implementations that are tightly tied to Kubernetes, but are also relatively general. If you want to think like, oh, how would this apply to Istio? How would this apply to, I don't know what app delivery platforms they're talking about, but like, I don't know, Terraform or something like that. And so, yeah, let's get our stake in the ground, and we can say this is what Kubernetes multi-tenancy looks like. And then if they just want to link to us and say, when you go to implement your cluster, go look at this doc, and see how the concept should map pretty closely.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think some of the questions you had added, Devdara, may actually belong at that level, right? And those are very good questions. Obviously, somebody has to think about if they're implementing a multi-tenant app, or if they want to take a single tenant app and, you know, kind of deliver it as a multi-tenant app. Yeah, but for our focus, I think it would be best to just kind of stay as close to Kubernetes as possible, and then point to other things for the broader level.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So Jim, So Jim, like Adrian mentioned, for the section on additional considerations, I've put my name as one of the authors. So I can take a stab at the node isolation and the fairness and the quality of service sections, but I don't have a whole lot of experience with the sandboxing aspect, right? So say if someone wants to contribute to that, that would be great, but I can take a stab at some of the other sections. Yeah.
No, the reason why I'm smiling is sandboxing always seems to be, you know, everyone is looking for the expert, because whenever it's come up in the past, we're like, okay, who should we talk to who has that background? So, yeah,
I can probably I can dig someone up from the advisor team at Google. And what are the other ones? Kata and Firecracker, I think, are the other big ones.
Firecracker would be,
that'd be great.
This is Jeremy. So I could contact a couple of folks at Twilio who are using Firecracker and Kata together.
Okay,
great.
Cool.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah, okay, I'll see if I can grab somebody for that. So.
Okay, sounds good.
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else either. We'll continue collaboration, and if we need to, you know, have smaller meetings or just discussions on Slack or whatever works for folks, feel free to, you know, call that out or just raise your hand and say, hey, you need some inputs or help on any section. But yeah, this is looking great. It's pretty exciting, and will be awesome to get see something in the Kubernetes docs.
Cool.
Great. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Ryan.